time. Zha Shang Hao and Wa Shang Hao to everybody on the call. And that's good morning and good evening in Mandarin. I know the topic for the day is COVID-19 and impact on IT services. Since it was COVID-19, I thought we should start it with Mandarin because that's where it all got started and that's what the whole news is all about. So once again, Zha Shang Hao and Wan Shang Hao. I'm Somu Chokkalingam, co-founder for Doensis. I've been in the Oracle space for almost 25 years now. And as a company, Doensis, all we do is around Oracle services. Quickly, I would like to introduce the two guests that we have. I think on this topic of IT services, we have the most experienced people that you could think of. Tim Norton, who is now founder for VMO, which is a vendor management office. And Tim has been with GE and UPS, and overall his applications and IT industry experience is over 4 decades. So for almost over 40 years, Tim has been in the space, and he has been leading outsourcing services as part of GE, UPS, and even in his current role at vendor management office. He's managed outsourcing engagements, which includes about 25,000 people. And now, most of them, when we think about IT outsourcing, the immediate countries that come to mind are India, Mexico, things like that. But if you see Tim is using a very good background where there are multiple countries, flags that he's put up there. I know he needs a whole lot of space to cover all the countries that he's worked with. He's almost worked with 12 countries including Bangladesh, Philippines, Poland, Ukraine, so Colombia, Italy. So Tim has been doing this IT outsourcing in several different forms. He's seen this move from being a co-located temp staffing engagement kind of models to what it is today. So I would also like Tim to add few words about his own experience and few things that directly relate to the IT outsourcing space, which people should be aware of from his past experiences. So Tim, you want to add a few things and introduce yourself a little bit more to the team?
Sure, thanks, Somu. As he said, my whole career has been in IT. I started in 1977 as a COBOL programmer, and very proud of that, and thought that was all behind me until I heard that New Jersey was looking for more COBOL programmers for some of their challenges. But I was with GE for 36 years, and the last 12 of them or so had to do with vendor management and maintaining the relationships between GE as a client and the vendors, helping the vendors learn how to deal with GE and how to help GE deal with the various vendors. That program grew to, like someone said, about 25,000 resources across 11 or 12 vendors. I retired, but not for very long before UPS came knocking and asked me to come there and help them build their vendor management office and their whole vendor strategy, which I did for another 4 years. And then since then, I have a consulting firm that provides some of those kinds of services to both clients and suppliers. And look forward to sharing some thoughts here today about how COVID-19 is impacting that environment.
Thank you, Tim. That's I think somebody with over 40 years of experience doing IT and outsourcing is one of the best people to talk about how things can change from here, how similar things have happened in the past. So what to expect from this. Thanks for joining this webinar, Tim. And coming to Curtis, a very multifaceted person. Has been working with very large firms like AT&T, SunGuard, Availability Services, over about 22 years of experience in this IT application services space. So we could call him a veteran, and not only from the IT application services, he's truly a veteran. He was in US Air Force before, and also was a former member of US intelligence community. So who else is better positioned to talk about security and things around this outsourcing and with this new model of working, all of that. Beyond that, I'm sure you could look upon many other things about Curtis in the public profile, but he's also a passionate fisherman, loves to be in the Atlantic Ocean in the boat on a sunny day, also a self-taught and an upcoming welder and a builder. So, thanks for joining us here, Curtis. I would like you to add few words and introduce yourself to the audience here.
Thank you, Somo. Yeah, I have sort of an eclectic background. All those hobbies sort of keep me focused on the things that I need to do when I'm, not doing those kinds of things. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. The background that I have really provides me a lot of insight into a lot of different customers, some of which, some former customers I know are even on the phone with us here today, that I've had the opportunity to work with and really get a good chance to see across a number of industries and a number of businesses across a number of businesses. Currently, I'm working with High Street IT Services. We're based out of Maryland, over in Rockville, Maryland. We're a group that really is leading our customers' journey to the future state of their current ERP, HCM, and student cloud environment. So we're really helping customers really get over to the cloud, with our mission being to really, be a service provider to help customers to work with Oracle specifically. We are very much in the Oracle space and really guide customers on their journey to public cloud, which is the answer to a lot of the things that we've been actually seeing here today. We do that through a number of mechanisms, sort of a world-class project management and service delivery mechanism through our High Street Navigator suite of tools and process, a set of methodologies really driven and built on the many cloud journeys we've helped to lead in financials, HCM, student, and higher ed, a set of unique intellectual property around things like Financial Accounting Hub and the ability to deliver some unique automation that allows us to deliver those tools in literally about half the time of a normal organization. Some tools that we do around integration as a service, and then long-term, support for these types of cloud environments, which we think are the answer to a lot of these things, with extended cloud services that provide an update, support, and expansion services. So great set of things that we look at in terms of that help provide a lot of answers to some of the things that we're actually seeing today. And we really enjoy getting out there and seeing the customers and working with our Oracle partner on this sort of cloud ecosystem.
Very good. Thanks, Curtis. Thanks for joining us here. I know it's a lot of busy time for you with working with customers and trying to get things done, but thanks for coming here to join and share your views on IT services and way forward after COVID-19. Now, for all of the audience, if somebody joined a little later, the next 30 minutes, what we're going to talk about is between Tim, Curtis, and myself, we're going to share our thoughts on what we think, how IT services would change in post-COVID-19, and what are things that might grow, what are things that might take a different turn, and how things would get impacted. So that's what we're going to cover in about next 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And for Q&A, we would request you to post your questions on the chat. We would collate them, and then we would give you an opportunity to come online, unmute yourself, and ask the question. If you have a challenge around audio or any such situations, I would ask the question on your behalf, and you would have one of us answer that question. So coming to COVID-19, when all of this started in early March, late February, people thought it's few weeks, lockdown, stay at home, things would get normal, it would get going. And as it moved on, now it's almost like 2 months over, and still, people are trying to figure out how to open up. There are a lot of countries which are still closed. Even in countries that are opened up, there are certain parts of countries which are still very, in terms of business, there is an effect in terms of what can be done, what cannot be done. So all of this is causing a lot of things to change with IT services. The first question that comes to people's mind is about what would IT services do when the businesses are not running, right? So meaning there are several businesses where revenues have dropped significantly. So in those cases, IT is not going to be their first thing that they're going to look at. There is going to be things that they're going to focus on in terms of how to get their business on and going. Few things that we would definitely touch upon during this discussion are things how IT would change for such businesses, how they would look at business continuance, and how IT could help in that. I think IT can play a large role in trying to get their businesses back into generating revenue. One of the case in such situations are grocery stores in India, which used to be 80% brick and mortar and only 20% in online. Today, most of these brick and mortar grocery stores, if adapted and tied up with some IT services firm to see how they could quickly move online. So IT has played a larger role there. That's not, I think IT service firms have been trying to get them to use the online mode, but there has been a lot of resistance to adapt to that. But now you see businesses willingly coming and taking things and using this platform to sell. So things like this, and then we will also cover on how remote working is becoming an accepted norm. In the past, financial services firms, a lot of data security related concerns were expressed, and today how that's changing. So that's another area that we would touch upon. We also see a lot of adoption. I think what Curtis was also mentioning in his introduction, how companies are willingly trying to use cloud and digital solutions now. We've been working with a casino, and casinos have been locked down for several months now, but we see casinos willingly wanting to move to cloud platforms, and they're willing to invest now and do those projects today so that when they open up, they are more prepared to work on such, the business would benefit by moving into cloud. So those are things that are changing. So these are some of the trends that we are seeing. And one other thing that we will also want to touch upon is what are spaces that will grow. I know for almost last 5 years, there's been a lot of talk around RPA, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Those have been the terms that every IT service, blockchain, these are terms that every IT services firms were trying to impress customers upon. Now, what would happen to all of this? So this is what we're going to cover in our discussions. So from my few thoughts that I had around how the Indian businesses were adopting these new IT initiatives, I will pass this on to Tim now for his views, and then we will move on to Curtis, and then we'll open up for questions. Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Somu. My perspective today will be both from the client and the supplier, as vendor management exists really between those two. If I think back to my experience at GE and UPS, I believe that more than half, maybe even 60 to 70% of my time was working with the suppliers, and the rest working with the client that I was working for. But I'm reminded of the Nationwide commercial, life comes at you fast, with respect to the current pandemic environment around the world. I could not have imagined last January that we'd be having this discussion today. discussion where virtually everyone in the world is impacted in some way, shape, or form by COVID-19. By and large, that impact is restricting, abrupt, and concerning for most people. The key difference from the nationwide commercial is that the event that impacted the person in the commercial was localized, specific, something only that impacted him or her. Other significant events resulting in change for more people at a time might be like hurricanes or forest fires, Uber, or a major change in technology like cell phones or cloud, for example. These kinds of events do cause disruption for sure, but still on a scale far smaller than the entire globe. COVID-19 has impacted virtually everyone and therefore every industry. When we think about how IT will face change as a result, you cannot categorically say that IT will change in every industry. Consider airlines, cruise lines, sports, concert events, subways and trains, education. These are all industries that will experience significant disruption in just about every part of their business. I believe it's not likely that the IT function will be the initial focus of business redirection and survival. There are far bigger fish to fry for them as they look to reopen their business with significant fundamental industry change. On the other hand, industries like logistics, masks and ventilator manufacturing, sanitization products, computer equipment related to working from home, and the entire infrastructure function, Blue Apron, home cooking, DoorDash, Grubhub. All these are industries that are booming and facing growth that was completely unexpected. Is IT a major focus for them? I would say again, it may not be top priority as those industries deal with huge growth potential. I'm not saying IT is not impacted, but rather not impacted to the same extent as to how their business throughput must adapt. What about IT service providers who have all these various clients from these industries that are facing everything from unprecedented growth to virtual survival and everything in between? How might they be impacted? In many cases, it may be the luck of the draw. Some clients may be terminating work they cannot afford any longer or no longer aligned with their current objectives. Others may want to ramp up existing programs to accommodate the growth. Suppliers will face the full gamut of these client consequences. But suppliers themselves has a business to run, and they too will need to absorb the dramatic change in behaviors of their clients or potential clients. Are they able to maintain their employees, and for how long if the contracts are terminated or throttled back? Do they have the right talent and skills to accommodate the changing requests of their clients who are now far more focused on infrastructure, security, business continuity planning, data protection, or accelerated transformation from legacy IT to cloud? This pandemic has made many clients rethink their global resourcing strategies as well as their slate of suppliers they engage with. Some suppliers were keenly ready for the current environment with a strategy of working in contract models that gave them latitude on resourcing, along with proper equipment and work location flexibility. Other suppliers were caught completely off guard, and when their workforce was not allowed to come to the office any longer, whether it be the client office or their own campuses offshore, they were dead in the water without proper equipment or connectivity. BCP programs may or may not have been robust enough to handle the current environment. If they were not, you can bet clients will be targeting a far better supplier solution in the very near future. Those suppliers that were ready should position themselves to pick up these budding opportunities. MSAs between suppliers and clients are often sticky points of contention as they were negotiated. But those who stuck with it and agreed to terms that provide for such circumstances as we face today are in an outstanding position at this time. Termination for convenience, for example, flexibility of the supplier to have workers work from home, and force majeure clauses are absolutely critical right now. In their absence, legal teams will be scurrying around to determine the legal measures that can be taken to move forward, and none of that will be fun. There may be a huge shift of talent as a result of clients laying off employees, suppliers downsizing in line with their client actions, and the uncertainty of employment altogether in the near future for many people. Suppliers and clients who have a better cash position and a nimbler business strategy may have outstanding opportunities to pick up some incredible talent. A key action for both suppliers and clients right now is better communication. Each side needs to proactively inform the other of their challenges and plans going forward. Here, there's a unique opportunity for innovative solutions to maintain existing projects and services while aligning to whatever the new environment may become. I'm seeing suppliers offer up their uncommitted resources to their clients under modified pricing models in order to shadow and align with the new programs the client is planning. This is far better than laying these resources off or carrying them unproductively for any length of time. No doubt some businesses will endure this pandemic and get back to work as usual. Others will emerge with bigger and stronger prospects ahead of them. And sadly, many will not survive. With survival defeated comes opportunity. Suppliers should be on the lookout for acquisitions of resourcing companies that could not survive on their own. They may have great people and client connections that would be of great value. Suppliers should look for clients that are not happy with their globalization or vendor profile strategies. Suppliers should carefully but quickly build talent and skills on a global scale aligned with what is likely to be in more focus from a technology perspective and location diversification. I cannot emphasize enough the increased amount of communication suppliers and clients should have at this time. Suppliers, make certain your clients know the full gamut of capability, talent, and innovation budget that you have, which is generally far wider than what your client has asked in the past. Clients, be looking for other suppliers. Before you look for other suppliers, you should expand and optimize the relationships you have with your current providers unless they've missed the boat completely in reacting to the current conditions with no plan to resolve. And a shameless plug for vendor management. Those clients who have instituted a vendor management organization of any sort will be far better off in the current business conditions and challenges than those that do not. Having employees whose primary focus every day is on resourcing the environment and nurturing the relationships between client and supplier will be far more prepared to adapt and execute going forward. All set.
Good, Ken. Okay, good. I think there are a lot of interesting points about how to stay focused with customer relationship, communication, ensure that you are nimble, adaptable, and try to use the opportunity in the right way. Look for modified ways of working. Wonderful thoughts, Tim. Curtis, over to you to hear from you about how things could change, what are areas that could get impacted, what should be both. You come more from the IT services offering side, but what do you see from the client side as well, and what do you think from the IT services side companies could do?
All right, thanks, Somo. And I agree a lot with a lot of the points Tim made. So I'll sort of address this in two different veins. First, as a service provider, as a leader inside a service provider business, myself and our business. So I know we have a lot of business leaders here on the phone as well, and you have to think about these things sort of two ways. There is my business and my customers, but as a service organizations, my staff is the business. That they are the servicing component. They are the business. So we've really had businesses have to be very clear and think about their employees and the communication that they're doing there, right? So we have had just an aggressive program to communicate with, both our customers and our employees. So stepping up the communications, in these times, in these very stressful times when, all around you is chaos at some level, when you're at home constantly, when you have to wear a mask to go out, when you haven't seen people work, and what you're able to do that can actually be a very grounding point. All right, and people are looking for grounding points, and organizations have to take their role in being that grounding point and taking care of their employees very, very seriously. Also, we often have to recognize that we have employees that are in some cases dealing with this quite personally. Either they are caregivers for someone that is in a high risk area or in a high risk category, or they may also have loved ones that have been materially impacted and may have lost loved ones. We've certainly got those situations across the board. So, your ability to communicate with your employees, your ability to communicate what you're doing and how you're handling these things is really, really critical in these times. Can't stress that enough. Service providers, we all think about customer satisfaction, but really employee satisfaction in a services business is what drives customer satisfaction. There is an absolute hard link between those two things. So we think about that quite a bit, and we really try to go to great lengths around that. Now, luckily for us, when we think about our organization, we were already operating in a very distributed model anyway. So we were 100% in the cloud. We were really a geographically diverse organization. So when this hit in early March, in fact, I was in California. I spent 2 days in Los Angeles and then 2 days up in San Francisco in early March. And in both of those meetings, I was with a customer and then had follow-on meetings in the evening. And they said, hey, we found out we had people in our team that were diagnosed with COVID. So that was sort of an interesting thing that people were just starting to think through. And I thought, well, am I bringing that home to my organization? I have to think about all those kinds of things. And we had a lot of consultants that were actually working remotely who were caring for high-risk people, high-risk category people, or were themselves high risk. And they just, we put travel on a halt immediately. We were very quickly to make sure our employees felt that they were secure and we weren't exposing them to anything. It was sort of interesting going through that process. Luckily for us, it really didn't impact us at all. I think the biggest impact, I'd worked out of the headquarters in Rockville as an example, and it was myself, the CEO, the CFO, and a few of the back office people. We started working remotely, but everybody else just continued on. And a lot of organizations, switching now to the customers, have really struggled through that model. And when you look across the industry that we see, so we service a number of industries, and we have to be careful about making broad categorizations about industries because we oftentimes see 2, 3, 4, or 10 customers, and we make an assessment relative to the entire industry. But 10 customers as a sample set, or 20 customers, or maybe even 100 customers as a sample set for an industry can be a very small sample set. So I can tell you what we're seeing across these industries, and we can decide how broadly that applies to the industry. Certainly, if you look across these segments, and I'll pick 4 or 5 different ones. If you look at the higher ed organizations, so schools, colleges, higher ed, all the campuses are now remote, completely remote. They have now been focusing on, how do they deal with their students in a remote construct. They have also seen maybe not necessarily a downturn in revenues from the educational services, but certainly from boarding, housing, food, those kinds of things, which can be a significant revenue driver for them. And you may not think that ties closely to their ERP solutions, but it does very much tightly tie to their student management systems. So those are very tightly coupled with their student financial systems are very tightly coupled with the ERP solutions. So we do see customers continuing down the path to focus on those systems as a function of enabling their customers, which is the student or the faculty. All right, so they're working through those kinds of things and how they deal with that now, how they have taken their businesses all remote and how they're dealing with that. We've seen a lot there. We think about public sector. Public sector is not an organization. Now, these public sector, let's focus on sort of state and local government here in the United States. State and local governments, while they have had the ability to service customers remotely, and many organizations had moved to try and deal with their constituents, myself in my town, I can do things online with my government. But what they had really not done was enable their own workforces to work remotely. Everyone can, people in the US can think about, going to the DMV or going to the whatever city office or going to whatever. And I'm sure that the same thing is true in India. Those organizations generally operate on a face-to-face basis. You need to go through that process. And they have really struggled to try and move into a remote model. They have done it, I think, fairly successful and fairly quickly, but I think we've certainly seen a shift there. They have really struggled about how they deal with a remote workforce. Mostly we've seen that in the processing times and other kinds of times that they deal with and how they deal with their constituents. Couple, other areas we think about, we work a lot in the healthcare segment, both for providers and sort of research clinicians kind of folks. Obviously, we know what's going on in the healthcare. They are very much focused on how they manage their supply chains and how they deal with those kinds of issues. So that has been a huge focus for them on the back end of the business and how they're dealing with all their employees and how they're providing them support. That's been a huge focus for them, in addition to providing the care. And then last and certainly not least, we deal a lot in the high tech world. I'd even put some of the folks that are on the phone today, they sort of are maybe they're in a e-commerce industry or they're in a healthcare, but they're really a high tech provider to that industry. Their business is high tech. And we've seen that business very widely. We've seen high tech organizations shifting their model. So the example you had for grocery stores was a really good example where how these traditional brick and mortars have now been able to shift online. Well, now how can high tech companies that might be in a travel industry, for instance, how can a travel industry move from transporting human to transporting goods, or transferring riders to transferring food and helping people to service their daily needs? So we've seen a big focus along those lines. Across the board, we've also seen, the financial, so you have the business operations of those groups and you have the financial operations of those groups. There is no doubt that IT spending has been cut significantly back. It depends upon the industry that you look at. When we look at the commercial segment of our business, and I'd put the high tech and healthcare and all those sort of commercial businesses into that commercial segment, those businesses tend to react very quickly because they can. They're very nimble. They can decrease spending immediately, and they can reprioritize. Government entities and other kinds of entities that are on more programmatic business cycles can be a little bit more stressed in that regard. But we've actually seen those businesses cut back their spending in the short term. I would say we're still very much in the storm. All right, we're starting to get a glimpse of what things look like when we come out of that, but we're still very much in the storm. And we've worked a lot with customers to think about, customers have thought May through July, they are going to see, I have customers that have said, look, 95% of my revenues will be down. I will be down 95% of revenues between May and July, or between April and June. I have other customers that are in the 80% range. They're in the 70% range. So as we all think about our business and go, what would we do if we had that level of downfall? So we would stop everything and we think about very critical services. There is nothing that wouldn't forward the business materially that I would spend anything on, whether it's IT or anything else. And we certainly see businesses reacting that way. And what we've done as a provider, where we're doing critical services for companies, we've actually done some financial restructuring with organizations to help them through that. So we've gone, in many cases, we've proposed models to customers that are looking at short-term needs. Can we provide them additional short-term needs and maybe finance that over a longer term for them? Can we take rate structures and things we're doing over the next 3 months and get very, very aggressive in terms of how we handle those things and actually provide longer term services for them? So we're really trying to work with customers to meet their needs. We've certainly seen that, CFOs, if you look at, many CIOs that I speak to have said, we have gotten through a lot of these problems in terms of remote workforces and dealing with security and dealing with other kinds of issues. And they've said, this is the new norm. This is how we will operate. So I'm not going to spend any money that is incongruent with the new norm. All right, so we've really worked with our customers and helped them embrace the new norm, and then try to think about now strategically how we can go look at enabling them toward that new norm. So.
Very good. That's interesting, Curtis. You took it based on key industries that you've been working on and how you're trying to work with customers when they have challenges around revenues, financial restructuring. And the point that you started off, which is the first human aspect of handling all of this, when people have difficult situations, be it on the customer side or on your own team side, how you manage that. That's, I think, the fundamental, because only then you could build on top of everything that's going to work together. So great. I think we will open up for questions. Please do put your questions in the chat window. We will take that and then start answering. While this is coming up, my first question to the panel, while the questions are still coming up, I see a couple of them already there, is I know Tim has worked with several countries in the past in terms of outsourcing. And Tim, one of your favorite ways of connecting with people is to embrace their local culture, get along with them, get to know them. I know when I've been part of your team, I know you've taken teams to your home to watch cricket match along with and you used to learn cricket along with all of us there. Uh, with with all this remote working now, where travel is going to become a big challenge, how would you think all this would evolve? What would be the new ways of bonding, building that culture, building that trust? How do you think that's going to happen, Tim?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind right away is when we're having these Zoom meetings is just take a look at the backgrounds, look behind Curtis. He's got all kinds of stuff on the wall there that there's stories there, and that those stories speak to his background, where he's been and what's of interest to him. Leslie over there, I'm interested in, where exactly he is and what's going on outside there and so on. I think, it so often clients and suppliers think very transactionally. I need you to do this, and they go do that, instead of really looking at the fact that you have two people here, two organizations. And again, that's what I believe vendor management is all about, is making sure that you realize that both sides need to be successful. It isn't a case of just beating on one until they finally get something done. So I think it shouldn't change a lot, other than the fact that you don't get to be able to be face to face. But this technology that we're on here and all of the others that are out there and emerging, I think should help to have that face to face as good as it can be at this time. But I do think that it's critically important for everybody's health to be able to do that.
Tim makes a great point there. It's video. So I'll tell you, at the beginning of this, I've worked remotely in some capacity, serviced global entities in North America. So where I wasn't necessarily, material. And at the beginning of this crisis, it was interesting. People were using a lot of tools like Teams and Zoom and other kinds of things, but that has just massively exploded. And the network providers, I'm sure, love that. But one of the things I've seen as this example is, the use of video has dramatically increased, and that's a great way to humanize and connect with people, right? So, what Tim says is, I look, Tim's got interesting things going on behind me, and I get to see Leslie. I've known Leslie for a while, and I'm getting some insight into where Leslie is. And the same thing here. It's a great way to humanize people and get connect. We forget how much we miss those things, and the video has just been a really good way to connect with people and humanize them and personalize them a little bit more than just a voice on a call. Now, it has its own challenges. We now can't walk around the house or walk around outside while we're on calls with our headsets on, and other things we might doing. If you're scheduled back to back and meeting all day, bathroom breaks become a little bit more difficult, and your office needs to be at least reasonably clean, and hopefully the dogs don't bark and come in behind you. But all these things, the use of this has really helped to bring us all together, I think, and really personalize and humanize us as well.
Great. So video is going to be the way of life, and exchanging ideas, thoughts, cultures is what I'm hearing from both of you, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have a question from Arun Ramaswamy. Arun, you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah. Yes, hello.
Hi, Arun.
Yeah, good morning. My question is regarding the outsourcing, the IT outsourcing. In the current situation, the work from home is being tested solidly. And there is a widespread talk and thoughts about making it a mainstream, particularly in the IT-oriented jobs. With respect to IT outsourcing, the significance of on-site, the nearshore or the offshore will get blurred. What would be the impact to the vendors as well as the clients? What is your view on this?
Who do you want us to take that? Someone, you tell us.
Curtis, go ahead.
So I think this is a continuation of a trend that we were already on. So as organizations continue to move remote, they have learned that where someone sits, whether I'm sitting here or whether I'm sitting in Bengaluru or I'm sitting in Chennai or I'm sitting in Poland or I'm sitting in Russia, where I'm sitting, it doesn't really matter. It is a great equalizer. And we've seen that across the board, that the best people are the best people regardless of where they are. and this will continue on that trend. Now, what it does, you know, providing you've got the infrastructure and all those other kinds of elements, but I think it just will continue on with that trend, and it will allow people to focus on not who's in front of me and sitting across the desk from me necessarily, but the outcomes that I'm trying to achieve. And if you look at the whole premise of outsourcing, you know, I remember sitting in a business meeting in, I think, '97. We were presenting a business plan to Gartner, and we were trying to come up with what we were. We were an internet managed application provider. We had all these different names, and they said, "Well, really, you're an application service provider." And we said, "Yes, that's what we are." And we wrote it down very quickly, and sort of became an industry term. But the value proposition was, look, we don't build cars. We don't service people in a medical construct. We're not, helping people with their body image. We don't do any of those things. We're experts in IT. And your core is your business, and our core is IT systems. So that is the fundamental premise of outsourcing, that you go to someone for whom they are an expert at doing what you need to have done that supports the core of your business. And I think this will only lead to that. And I think, you know, we see some short-term hiccups. You know, we'd had a conversation about nationalism and some other kinds of things that had come up. And I think those things are largely just blips in the radar. Sort of as we're in the storm, people think about things and they focus on the wrong things. But I think that the trend will continue, and if anything, it will accelerate the trend, and it helps us think about the globalization. So globalization and outsourcing is one of the things that helps you get through this environment, as opposed to hampering you in getting through this environment. So if you think about what helps you and what doesn't, and what's an asset to the business and what's not, and you look at where you put outsourcing and relationships with organizations for whom the services you need is a core as a core service for what they do, the process will only ever increase. And if you think of what has gotten people through this, whether it's cloud solutions or experts in cloud solutions, those kinds of things, the people that can enable those technologies that help businesses focus on their core mission and servicing their employees and servicing their constituents, their customers, the trend will only increase and expand, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Let me, I'd like to add something to that. I think one of the most important pieces, the working from home, obviously a lot of folks have already been doing that. Now there's tremendously more. Some companies are realizing that it's now possible to do that. Until this happened, they didn't even know that that was possible. They may not have even allowed it in their MSA. There's a logistics company I'm familiar with that didn't even allow working from home in their MSA. So they had to scurry around and get that fixed. But I think one of the most important things for both clients and suppliers to do is to consider the contract type that you have. When you do staffing, time material staffing, the need to be closer to face-to-face is generally there. When you have your fixed price outcome-based type contracts, it's really up to the supplier to decide who's going to work on it, where they're going to work from. All those decisions are theirs and not the client. They don't need to worry about it. And so you don't have to have seating at the client site and so on. So working on these more advanced models, I think, is really important. And the other is predetermining the work that you actually want to get done and what the outcomes are to be. I've seen so many clients say, I just need people. Just get me a bunch of people, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. No, you decide what all needs to be done first, so that you don't have to have as much face time in order to get it all done. But I think that's, I think it's here to stay. I think the idea of working outside the office is here to stay for a long time. There will obviously be some exceptions. And I think we're all going to have to learn how to make that work better without the dog barking in the background and all of those kinds of things that Curtis was talking about.
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
There's a question from Pani. Pani, you want to unmute and ask? He's asked the question to Ken. Pani, you want to unmute?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I had multiple questions to Tim, actually. So first of all, so he has a flag actually behind, right? So what do you know about India, and have you been there? And what kind of experience you have with the Indian folks and the Indian business?
I've been there 14 times.
Wow.
I absolutely love going to India.
Right.
What I tell everybody and what I feel deep in my heart is every time I go to India, I have a higher respect for humanity than any other time. I see, I love America. I live here. I was born here, but I do see a lot of attitudes and a lot of waste and a lot of things that just don't seem to come across when I go to India. Everything is, everything lives for a whole lot longer. That scooter can be fixed 100 times in India, whereas in the United States, a lot of times if it runs out of gas, you throw it away and buy another one. I'm kind of embellishing that a little bit, but I love India, and I love going there to talk to the people and meet the people that I've been working with. Every time I've gone there, the relationship gets better and the work gets better when I get back. So absolutely love it.
Yeah, same on my end. I've been going probably, with the exception of the past probably year and a half, maybe a year and 3 months, I've been going to India probably about at least twice a year, sometimes more, sometimes less, but at least twice a year, probably since about 2002. So I don't know how many trips that is. I'd have to count them up, but it's
a lot.
It's enough. So I've operated just in terms of cities. I've operated mostly out of Hyderabad and Bengaluru. I've had multiple organizations in there. Operated out of Chennai also with a couple different organizations, and a couple of other cities. But I probably spent the most time in those locations. I never, every time Somo and I met, we met in Boston. We were never able to get together in Chennai, unfortunately. But we can work on that.
Actually, when you're in Boston, actually, just ping me, okay? I'll get you a number from Somu so we can have a
We will do that one. There's a question from Shakti. Shakti, you want to unmute and ask?
Morning, Curtis. Shakti.
Hello, Sakti. How are you doing?
How are you? I'm doing great. So, as per today's unemployment numbers, I just see like it's been spiked to 38 million in US. Just want to understand, so with respect to the existing projects or the projects in hand or upcoming projects, how do you foresee the things getting outsourced to, ODC, like say India? Maybe the first priority to cater.
Go ahead.
Maybe the first priority to cater the, to cater the candidates in US rather than outsourcing to India, or vice versa? How do you foresee it?
Well, I think you'd have to, again, we're making a broad categorization against 38 million people, which will be tough for us to do. But if you look at what sectors have been driven, what has driven a lot of those unemployment numbers, and you look at the businesses that have been most materially impacted by the COVID. So High Street, as an example, certainly we have a presence in India, in Bengaluru, and I know I have other friends in the industry that are certainly there. They have, we haven't been impacted. We're still providing those kind of core services. If you look at people that have really been materially impacted, where they've had to go, remove large percentages of their staff, not a person here and there, but large percentages of their staff. It is businesses that really engage with the public routinely. So what you see the most here in terms of, you have a very large number of restaurants, as an example, that have had to just completely close their doors, and they've had to eliminate 70% of their staff and move to a completely different operating model where they're doing remote kind of takeout food. So that's really fundamentally changed that workforce. And there's lots of businesses like that. So I don't think that, and those businesses will start to come back. So that's probably the biggest single driver of those numbers, where you have entire industry segments that have been completely shut down and have had to fundamentally change their operating models. And that has really driven those numbers way up. And if you look at what the government has been doing around there, in the US around Paycheck Protection Program and those kinds of things, it's really focused on those kinds of small businesses, because that really drives those things. I'm sure there have also been, you can say that there would be also an element of that's happened across other industries. The one thing I would think of, as people are coming back online, they will look for the most efficient and most effective way to actually return to online. So the new norm will be what is the most cost-effective way for me to do this? Every problem every problem I've ever dealt with in business is an opportunity. And I very rarely see a customer deal with a problem, a customer, a business, or, you know, myself personally, where I deal with a problem and I look exactly the way I looked when I came out of that problem. I solve the problem, and in so doing, I create a new scenario for myself and I operate more effectively. So when you hear Mark Zuckerberg, I saw a quote in here, we see Mark Zuckerberg and others saying, working remote is the new norm. They are now, everyone recognizes this is probably how we need to operate on a long-term basis. And the COVID has become a compelling event to facilitate that. It's a forcing function. So as that relates to outsourcing, again, companies that may have been resistant to that for irrational reasons, and I deal with, you know, lots of companies that have irrational fears around those kinds of things, they now look, and some of those irrational fears are based on protectionist sort of attitudes. Those things really get flushed away in a compelling event. So if anything, I don't see, it will not be, if the source of your question, are we going to hire back 38 million people and then get back to outsourcing? I think quite the contrary would be true, actually.
Thanks, Curtis.
Narayanan, there's a question you want to unmute and ask. Narayanan. I will ask on his behalf. I'm not seeing him. Narayanan, you want to ask? Kripa, can you unmute Narayanan?
Sure, but I mean, he has the ability to do it. Maybe you should just go ahead and paraphrase the question.
So I think the question is around security. We've been talking a lot about remotely working, which means this would need a lot of investment in terms of security. So sufficient budget needs to be provided for that to meet this challenge, and also think around data security. Slightly adding to what he said, not only security, a lot of new digital initiatives, cloud initiatives that the customers are taking would need more spend from businesses. Given the current state, several small and medium businesses are, would they be able to invest and do all of this? How would they handle this? Tim or Curtis, what's your opinion?
Well, keep in mind that, again, it depends on the industry, right? Some of these, even small and medium-sized companies are still doing all right. But I still maintain, before COVID-19, all of these companies had plans and they were doing external resourcing and things were pretty robust. Certainly there were some things good and bad and so on. I don't think any of that is actually changed. That is all still there. There's just this other roadblock in the way, and that is this current pandemic, which has a life that we don't really know how long it's going to be. But let's say that it all ended tomorrow. Let's say that all of COVID-19 were to end tomorrow. I believe that all of this other stuff would just flood through the system. The problem is that many companies don't have the ability to withstand this time because of cash flow or because of whatever the impact of COVID is that impacts them so much that they can't survive. Certainly those folks, you have to figure out what's going to happen there. But I just think that, again, I relate this to a racetrack, NASCAR racetrack. You know, they're going around and around, everything's going really good. Now you have to go to a pit stop. Everything stops. You're at the pit stop, you've got to get everything fixed, whatever it is. The next step, you're going to go back around fast again. I kind of think it's going to be something like that, but we don't know how long it's going to be. But the first part of the question, security and so on, IT is a moving entity. IT doesn't stay the same. In my days at GE, Jack Welch made it very clear that he did not like IT because it changed so much. So people like me who started as a COBOL programmer, they needed to retrain me into CICS. Then they needed to retrain me into something else and then into Java. And so on, he hated that retraining. And that's where outsourcing was born in 1993 at GE. And then several years later, I met you, Somu. So that's what we do. That's what IT does. We figure out what the next technology is, and then we as suppliers and we as clients look to adapt whatever technology seemed to work for us. And so I think this whole thing around security, we're going to have to refigure out what it means to have security at the same level in the office now in our homes. So I don't think it's a showstopper. I just think it's something that we need to figure out, and we've got some awesome minds thinking about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would echo some of the things Tim said there, and the issue for the CFO or the CSO or the CSIO is really facing just an incredible shift inside the business. And it's interesting. The more security is an ever evolving problem, right? And the more complicated and the more disaggregated things are, the harder it is to secure. So I go back to my days in the military. If you wanted a secure facility, the simplest thing to do is have a tent and a Marine and a gun, and you've got a secure facility. Now I'll take that and multiply that out to a distributed workforce where what you have fundamentally done is you've increased what's known as the attack surface, the points of vulnerability across the board. So the game has been fundamentally changing, and since March. So I'm a member of the FBI InfraGard program. It's a partnership between the FBI and business where we work together to make sure that we're aware of threats inside the environment. And in March, early March, we had already seen the threat picture start to change because the bad people, the people that are looking to do different things, knew that attack surface was dramatically increasing, and that there was now a remote workforce, and there was an opportunity to exploit that remote workforce in new ways. So the role of the CSO, the role of the security group is, really got accelerated, and they've really had to, we've seen a lot of folks really have to focus on some things in the short term. So rolling out multi-factor authentication and getting those things rolling out, thinking about how they could do endpoint detection and response kind of scenario, how we think about encrypted communication, where our data lives. So if I've got a workforce and I've got them all working on laptops and I've got them all working on PCs and I send them home, how much of my data is actually home with them? That's a real interesting thing to think through. So the security will be an absolute component, which also really helps drive a lot of the work into the cloud, because again, I'll use my, here at High Street, we work, all my data is remote. So I have a laptop that I use, I have a home computer I use, I have computers I use in the office. But basically, beyond what I might do locally, they're pretty much web terminals. All the data and all the systems exist remotely, they exist in the cloud. So I've solved a lot of those problems, and I think a lot of companies have really had to react very quickly where they don't have that capability. They've got to make sure that they are able to control the endpoints, authenticate their workforce, and actually get them in. So I think that the CFO plays a critical role in, the CSO plays a very critical role, them and their team plays a very critical role in that, and helping to lock down those systems until they can move to something that provides those capability as a nascent availability.
Very good. We have 2 minutes left. We can take one last question if you're okay with, which I think if we do, we might run a little bit over time. Is that okay, Tim and Curtis? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Vidya, you want to unmute and ask? You have a question. That'll be the last question for the session.
Yes, Somu. Good evening, Tim. That was very interesting when Somu said about you watching cricket match along with the team. So I thought I should ask this question to you. I know many companies are freezing hiring, but we are still hiring, but we are adapting certain methods using technology, engaging people. But still, I feel the challenge is part of making the new employees feel like the member of the team. I still feel we need to get improved in that. So what's your advice? What's the best way of doing that, Tim?
First of all, I love cricket. I think it's an awesome sport. And I really enjoyed learning it from some of the first folks that I met from India. This problem of hiring remotely is certainly not new. We've had this for a long time, and there's no question that the idea of being able to hire folks globally sounds like a great thing, but you just must find a way to include them in the team. And I think that GE did a lot of hiring in India, and it was a struggle. Those folks did not feel part of the team, and we didn't often treat them that way. When the Jack Welch Technology Center was created, they made it a point to make sure that 99% of the people hired into there were Indian nationals. The only person that was not was the leader of it for at least for the first couple of years in order to get kind of the culture of GE incorporated into that. But in order to make sure that we weren't hiring folks in other parts of the world and then trying to change their culture to the US, which would be a disaster. I think the key is really recognizing that, you know, we're all different folks, different cultures, different locations, but just as you try to do that with your teams that are face to face with you in your offices, you have to include the ones remotely as well. It is not an easy thing to do. It also takes initiative from those folks that you hire to make sure that they include themselves into the wheel. You know, you can't just wait for everything to happen. Sometimes you have to go make it happen. And so it's something from both sides, a big challenge. And it's bigger now because there's going to be a lot more of that remote. Maybe even the hiring process will be remote. So the interviews and all of that sort of thing. So I think it's a matter of having focus and perspective that's an extra challenge is the way to at least to get in front of that a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think Tim's spot on. I think it's a focus issue. And I think what we're seeing now is, you know, having run global teams, you know, for a very long time, I can think about, I think of one individual I worked with down in Raleigh. Now I live up near Annapolis. And while I love to go to Raleigh, I just don't have time to go to Raleigh. And I made it an absolute focus to make sure that I was communicating with the group in Raleigh, in Bangalore and wherever constantly. And senior leaders have to do this because it is rare that a senior leader has all the teams around them all the time. So they have to really focus on outreach, and you have to be pretty programmatic around your outreach. Have I talked to my leader in Raleigh in the past 2 days? What are the conditions under which I'm going to talk to them? Let me create these situations. Let me make sure that I'm highly connected to that. And with this globalization coming down that everyone's working remote, we all have to operate that way. So we all really have to drive those interactions. And we all have to make sure that we're very connected. And it takes a little more effort. 8 hours in a day disappears very quickly. You can't just pop over in 5 minutes and talk to somebody in their office. You can't do this. You really have to focus on building those relationships. The chat solutions allow us to have 5 conversations with 5 people all at the same time. That's a really beneficial capability, but you really have to think about and drive that integration. The other thing I would add around for those folks that are actually out there that are interviewing, if you have the chance, I've done many interviews where the interviewee, the candidate, just was probably a great candidate, but came off horribly because they had really not thought what they looked like in their video environment. So the camera shot them from here down. They talked to me the entire time like this. They were clearly not familiar with the medium, and they didn't show their best selves. So I would encourage everyone that, you know, I would tell you, we were coached very heavily on what we looked like on the screen before we came in here. And that's just a good practice to do. And everyone should really do that as well. Get your lighting right. Try to cut the shine on your head down a little bit, whatever, you know, those are all things that help you come off a little bit better and help you connect to people.
Interesting. So you're saying there should be an onboarding session for interview as well before the actual interview happens.
I think that the candidates have to take that on themselves. They have to make sure that's part of what Tim said. You got to provide that effort too. So as a leader, you have to make sure you're connected. But as an individual contributor, as an employee, you've got to make sure you drive that connection too.
There was one little trick that I did, even when my boss was in the other side of the building and I just didn't feel like I was seeing him or her as much. I would schedule a meeting and I would call it Tim time, and there was no agenda. I just wanted to go in and just talk, and we would just talk. I just felt like he didn't know exactly what I was working on, so. That was something I did. It was probably every couple of months or so, and I just needed Tim time. And so if I was doing this remotely, I might do the same thing with my boss. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm retired now. So, but it is something that I would highly recommend that like Curtis was saying, the proactive as an employee, the touch time, if you don't feel like you're getting enough, make it happen.
Yeah.
Very good. With 3 minutes over time. Thanks everyone for participating. I think at the peak of the session, we had close to about 80 audience. It was very nice having all of them here. Special thanks to Curtis and Tim for accepting and coming and sharing your valuable thoughts. I know collectively you have over 70 years of experience now doing this between both of you. So that's a rich experience from a variety of industry and a lot of thoughts. And it has seeded a lot of thoughts in mind for people to think further and explore what all could be done. So wonderful session. Thanks everyone. I'm sure this will be available in social media in different forms. And as and when they're available, we will also share those links with everyone. Thanks everyone. Bye. Have a safe,
Thank you.
Yeah, have a safe day. Bye.
Thank you. Stay well, everyone.
Bye.